Hi friends, today we're going to talk about hot glue guns and safety. So notice first that I'm working on top of a metal cookie tray or a baking sheet. That is first and foremost. You must be working on top of this. It is where I rest the glue guns. It is also where I'm working. It's my work surface, and that serves as two purposes. The first thing is it's protecting your table underneath. It's safe for the glue guns to be resting on this surface. It also serves to make things easier for you. After the glue comes out really hot, instead of waiting for something to dry like we would with regular glue, we are waiting for it to cool. And if something sticks to this metal surface, after it cools, it will pop up quite easily. And you can pull off or cut off the strings that maybe by accident, but are inevitable when you get working with hot glue gun. You end up with some of these, I call them strudels, but they're these little strings of hot glue when it was melted. That can pop up and off of this metal tray really easily. The other thing you'll notice is we should always be working with popsicle sticks. We should never be pressing our item down with our finger because we can burn ourselves. So use these popsicle sticks as a pretend finger. You can control the craft, the item that you're gluing. You can also control the glue. So if you had the urge to push a button into a little dab of hot glue, you could get it squirting out or squeezing out the sides and accidentally burn yourself. So instead, we want to be able to use the popsicle sticks to press things down and hold them until they cool. You'll notice a difference in color and size of the hot glue sticks. This is what it looks like before it melts. Some of them are very clear and transparent. Some of them are a little more yellowish of a tint. Some of them are more opaque, and that means you cannot see through it. Some of them are long. And if you look at the diameter or the size, these two are for a big glue gun, something like this. And the smaller, we call them mini glue sticks, will fit in a mini size glue gun. So we are going to make sure that we are putting our glue gun down in an area that it is not on top of other glue sticks. We are not putting it on top of the glue gun cord. That could potentially melt the cord and be very dangerous. We are not putting it down on top of our craft supplies. That could potentially be a fire hazard. We are making sure when we put the glue gun down, we are putting it down in an area that is safe and on top of the metal surface, not on your table. Okay, the other thing we want to talk about is what happens if you get burned. The first thing you should do is carefully place your glue gun in an area that you know it's safe and there's nothing around this hot metal tip. This portion gets very, very hot. You should never touch this part, and you should not have anything else touching it. If you burn yourself, the first thing you do is put this down safely and go to cold water and put your fingers or whatever you've burned under cold water. We want to put ice or cold water on the skin surface so that it stops the burning. If you have a little piece of glue stuck to yourself, when you put it under that cold water, you could be able to pick it off and then proceed to let cold water run over it. Please let me know as you're walking out of the room to go get a sink. Don't just run out. You need to let me know, Miss Joy, I burnt myself on the glue gun. I need to go to the cold water. Do not just throw your glue gun down and run, Okay, that is not acceptable. The other thing we need to know is that there are times we need to call the nurse before you just go down there. If we're in the art room, I have an ice pack in the art room. If we're working in your classroom and you don't have a sink in there, you need to let me know before you leave the classroom. If there's a sink in your classroom, you may safely put this down, go to the sink, run it under cold water, and let me know immediately. Even if you feel like it's not a big deal and it's tiny, you must let me know. So friends, the goal is to not burn ourselves, right? We should never touch this tip. Another thing we should learn is that some glue guns are high temperature and some are low temperature. Some have an option. It could be on high, or we could push the button down and have it on low. High or low. If you're going from low to high, you'll need to wait for it to warm up. You can see that this temperature gauge tells us this is heating on a low temperature to 248 degrees. That's almost as hot as what we would use to cook cookies in the oven, to bake. High is 380 degrees. So it might take some time for the low temperature to get up to the high. How do you know when it's ready? The glue might start to come out a little bit of the tip. You can look visually. You can sometimes see it coming out a little bit of your glue gun. There's a drop right there. I have not pressed the trigger, but it dropped out. That tells me it's warm. Here's a lower temperature one. Nothing's dropped out yet because it needs to have new glue added. You will never ever want to force a glue stick in. If there is a glue stick here, this portion has not yet melted. We need to wait for it to come down the chamber into this area where it gets warmed up. Let it warm up, and then it will turn into that clear, runny looking mess. That's what we want. If it's not warmed up yet and you try to press the trigger too much and try to force this down into the barrel, it will not work and you can break the glue gun. You can break the trigger and the spring that's connecting it if you're forcing a glue stick down. That little motion when you pull the trigger is trying to gently push, there's a spring inside, gently pushes your glue stick down just enough where it can get a little melty. So I'm just pushing it in till it stops naturally. I'm not forcing any pressure on this end. You do not want to force this. When you're ready and it's warmed up, you can gently press the trigger and some will start to move down. Occasionally, I might need to help push a little bit, but I'm barely putting any pressure on the back while I'm pulling the trigger. Sometimes you need to do that a little bit and gently just to get the stick started down. You can feel when you're pulling the trigger, if nothing's coming out, it's not warm enough. That amount in there is how much warmed glue you have. If you've just used a whole lot of glue and you're waiting for the next portion of the glue stick to warm up, you may need to put this down and wait a few minutes or switch to a different one. Let's load this one. If you accidentally grab a large glue stick, you'll notice it does not fit in the hole. Nothing on this should be forced, okay? So here, let's grab a longer stick and you can see this is essentially 2 glue sticks in one. I will put it down. I'm going to use gravity to help me hold that in there. While I get started, I might gently hold the end, but I'm not pressing the glue stick down. I'm not forcing anything. Again, nothing should be touching these hot tips. So when you're putting them down, be mindful. Very often I come in and see someone has put their glue stick in the way, or they've put their hot glue gun on top of glue sticks. These glue sticks are not cheap. We do not want to waste this. If you put your hot glue gun on top of that glue stick and it melts, you might ruin the glue stick and the glue gun. Be very mindful. So now to show you, I've accidentally on purpose to show you, this little melted part of the glue stick can get caught and mess up this glue gun if I were going to use this glue stick in a different glue gun, okay? So we have to be careful. Now that these are cool, they should pop up fairly easily. So when you're done using this cookie sheet, you should not be putting it away with all these glue blobs all over it. You want to pick off your glue, which can be kind of fun to do. All that wasted glue needs to go in the garbage can. So let's practice on paper. Usually when we're doing paper to paper, we want a glue stick. If we're using tacky glue or Elmer's glue, we need to wait a while before it dries. The benefit of using a hot glue gun is that it doesn't have to dry, it just has to cool. So sometimes we have to hold something in place for a while until it's cooled off before we can let go. If there's a base that something fits into, we might be able to let it go and let it cool on its own. But if we were trying to attach something flat surface to flat surface, we would need a lot of glue to make that hold on to each other. We would have to build up a structure of glue, like a puddle, and stick this in. That can be wasteful. So rather than doing that, we don't want to waste the glue. We could make a support structure. Maybe you make a little L bracket. Maybe you plan ahead and make a groove, something to hold on to the other piece. If I'm doing a button to paper, I do not want to get my hands close to that blob of glue, so I'm going to use my popsicle sticks and kind of gently move it over. You can use them both together, or you can just use one. The idea here at the end is once you've got it in place is to let it cool. You can see it's raised up above the paper. Okay. Let's try something else, something kind of dangerous. This might melt. If I were to use a high temperature and here, let's just pretend I'm going to attach something. This little dab of glue is melting into the styrofoam, and that can be dangerous. So if something's potentially meltable, we want to make sure we're using a low temperature setting. We're never ever pressing our finger into it, and we're never touching the tip of the glue gun to the styrofoam. No glue is coming out, but that tip was so hot it melted the styrofoam. Okay, this is what not to do. Also, we should not be wasting glue. This is an example to show you for this video. I should not see people doing this to pick it off for fun. You get little blobs accidentally, then at the end you will pick it off because that's part of cleaning up. So another thing about supporting and attaching, if, say, for example, I want to attach this little turtle and have him standing upright on something, he doesn't have a whole lot of space to grip the surface. Only two little points on his feet would be actually attaching to a flat surface. So how could I reinforce this and give it structural support? Well, I could choose something that has more surface touching, but this still also might flip back and forth. So I can build a little L-shaped out of cardboard. I can use kind of a cardboard or a cereal box. If I'm using thick cardboard, then I should be using my special cardboard scissors, being very careful that my other hand is out of the way and there's no danger of these fingers behind there getting snipped. To make an L bracket, I would cut a rectangle, fold my piece in half, and cut it down to the size where it's not really showing. Now this part would attach down to the flat surface. This part would attach to whatever's upright, and it will help hold my little snail up. I could do 2 little tiny ones for my turtle's feet. Let's try that. They're going to have to be super skinny if I don't want them to show. And I might need to cut them lower so that they don't show. Let's see how tall the turtle's back is. That one would show, so I could cut that down a little shorter. All I would need is 2 little dabs of glue. 1, 2. Attach my L bracket. What am I doing wrong here? I should not be using my finger, right? Okay, so the other thing is my L bracket should be to the bottom. Right now it's not all the way to the bottom of the foot. So I have to slide that down before my glue cools. I also should not have done a second dab of glue yet, because while I'm attaching this one and trying to get it in the perfect spot, this one has now cooled and is a waste. So I will see if that picks off easily or if I should just go over top of it. In this case, it picked off easily. Okay, to do it right, I'm using a tiny little amount of glue. I'm getting my popsicle stick ready. I am adding my L bracket. Now I'm pressing it down with a popsicle stick. I'm checking to see if it's low enough. This one maybe I could slide down a little bit. Okay, pressing it down. Now I'm going to use some glue down here. 2 little spots should be enough. Okay, 1, 2 spots on each. Remember to press down with your popsicle stick. Do not be tempted to use your fingers all the time. Now that is going to give a lot more structural support to my turtle. What if what I'm attaching is so thin that there will not be very much structural support? How could I problem solve to make this a better attachment? Maybe I poke some holes down into the base to help give some stability. I could get a pencil. I'll poke a little hole. I'm not going all the way through my styrofoam, but I've got a base started. Now I only have to add a little bit of glue, and it's still hot enough that I can push my bird through those holes and down into the styrofoam. Now it's really strong. Okay, to make it even stronger, I could make another L bracket and attach that as well. I could make a super skinny one for each leg, but that's not going to be very strong. Maybe I use a bigger one and just have it show. Maybe that's just something I have to give up the visual look of it to know that it's strong enough to not break. Okay. How do I know when to use hot glue or how to choose a different type of glue? Well, with tacky glue, it's a lot thicker than an Elmer's glue, okay? This would be a little more runny than this one. This is super thick, so it might stay in place better, but it still takes a bit to dry. So we would have to hold this in place or brace it with something to let it dry for a couple hours at least, if not overnight. So if I'm building quickly and I don't have the time to wait for this to dry before I keep going, maybe I opt for some hot glue in that situation. Now that seems like it's standing up pretty straight on its own, but I know that that's not cool all the way yet. Maybe I add a little dab of hot glue because I know it's going to cool very quickly. And then I reinforce with a little extra glue that it doesn't matter if it takes a while to dry. Maybe I want to do some double reinforcement. Okay, this type of glue, of course, I can touch my finger too. I'm smoothing off any extra, and I'm going to go wipe my finger and wash it in the sink immediately. What if I'm gluing a bunch of popsicle sticks to each other? Should I be using this wet glue? Maybe not, because that might be frustrating. It would probably seep through and stick to the background. If it was paper, I could get very frustrated very quickly, because if I let it dry like this with glue all over it, I wouldn't be able to pick those up like a raft. It would be stuck to that paper. So in some cases where I want to mix different types of glue, I cannot have a bunch of wet glue and then go over it with a hot glue gun. The hot glue gun simply will not stick after you've got wet glue on that. It might cool, but it's not sticking to what's underneath it. This is a bad idea. What's a better idea is starting with a little bit of hot glue, a tiny little dab, maybe in 2 different spots for structural support. My fingers are far away from this glue. They're not right up next to it. And I'm lining up my sticks. Maybe this is just enough glue to hold them together temporarily, but after it's cool, it might snap and break apart. So I might want to reinforce these somehow. Perhaps I use another popsicle stick that goes across. Maybe 1 or 2 could do that. I could use big or the same size. So rather than trying to glue every single little piece together in a row like a dock on a lake, I could add some glue to this stick. The reason I need glue all the way across instead of just a little dot is because it needs to stick to each and every single popsicle stick. Another different way I could have done that was by adding 1 dot to each stick, then placing the top popsicle stick down. Which do you think would waste more glue? That looks like a lot more glue. I'm pressing it down with my fingers, but I am being very mindful that this is a wide popsicle stick, so I knew it wouldn't squish out the sides because I didn't put very much. If I had just done that with a thin popsicle stick, when I pressed it down, it might squeeze out the sides and burn my fingers. Okay, when I turn this over, they're staying together quite nicely. Now I might choose to add reinforcement glue. Okay, I could do a little glue and spread it in the cracks with my finger, push it down in those cracks, This will need a long time to dry, but it's going to be very strong. Now it's lifted up. So if I put it on a scrap paper, I'm pretty sure that this is not going to stick to the paper because it's elevated. If you don't want to use your finger for this, you could use a paintbrush that is just for glue. We have some paintbrushes that are just especially for glue. Okay, this is a nice thick glue, so it's not dripping all over. If I was using Elmer's, it probably would drip all over the place because it's a little bit more runny. So this might push out the back and end up making my piece stick to my scrap paper, because I need to put this on scrap paper in order to get it into the drying rack, right? So now we've combined some glues, but we did it in a way that we were not wasting too much hot glue and we were reinforcing our structure. Friends, the last thing to tell you is that this little mini glue gun does have 2 little feet, so you could stand it up like that. Sometimes they don't want to cooperate and they end up falling over. So I think it's safer to actually lay it down intentionally, because you know you're being mindful about what's around it. If it was upright like this and I moved away to get another glue stick and it fell over, I was not then in control of what was nearby. So I'm going to place it down on its side. Because it's on the cookie sheet, it's safe and nothing is around it. So friends, be very safe, be very mindful, no fooling around so that you don't end up bumping into somebody who's using a hot glue gun. That could be dangerous. Maybe they're being very, very safe, but someone around them is not paying attention. That could be dangerous. So please be mindful about what's happening around you, but never, ever, ever look up while you're applying glue. If you're doing this and pulling the trigger and adding hot glue, you should be looking directly at what you're working on. Okay, friends, thank you very much and have fun.